All right, so we had an emergency here. Our AC unit stopped working. House was up to the mid 80s, middle of summer here, and we were able to get this fixed for just a few bucks. I'm gonna go ahead and show you what we did and how you can avoid a service call too. All right, so we've got a major issue here. It's midsummer, midday, 84 in the house, and our AC unit has quit working. So our AC unit's about 20 years old, and you can hear the buzzing. So one trick that I've been able to use in the past is to take a small stick and just kind of give it a jump start, give it a boost. And sometimes that's enough to kind of kick it into gear, but not this time. Still buzzing. Fan blades aren't starting up. Taking off a couple screws here on our panel. And this is what we've got going on. We've got our electrical coming in. We've got our capacitor here. I've had to replace this about 12 years ago, and I'm gonna see if that is our issue here. And so before starting any work on our AC unit and the capacitor, I'm gonna shut off the breaker. So with the power off, it then becomes important to discharge the capacitor. Without doing that, you could be in for an electric shock, or there's other hazards around that. So there's a few ways to discharge a capacitor. You could use a resistor and some insulated leads to connect it and slowly discharge it. Otherwise, if you've got screwdrivers with rubber or plastic handles, so insulated handles, you can just use those to essentially touch across the terminals here. So we've got our common, and then we've got a fan and a compressor lead there. And so we are going to kind of rub these screwdrivers across the terminals here. And it discharges super quick, so as long as you're touching the terminals, it's almost instantaneous. So the buzzing noise that we were hearing out here is often a telltale sign that the capacitor may be going bad. So we've gone ahead, ordered a replacement on Amazon. Important thing here is just to make sure that the specs on your replacement one match what's currently installed. In this case, we've got 40/5 microfarads. So we've got 40 microfarads here to run the compressor and 5 to run the fan there. That's what those two numbers mean. And then the other important note right here is the voltage. In this case, we say 370 and 440. The 440 would indicate that's like the maximum voltage that this can handle. So even though our compressor is only a 240 volt, when you are doing a startup of your compressor, you may have spikes of greater voltage than what's actually being supplied to the unit. So it is important to try and match up the voltage on your new one to whatever is installed here. So what I'm gonna do is quick check on our new capacitor here and just confirm that they're within tolerances needed. All right, so what I'm going to do here is essentially put one probe onto our common and then one probe onto the hermetic, and we should be seeing around 40 microfarads, and we are at 40.5. So we're well within the plus or minus 6% on the label here, and that's perfect. So then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go from common to fan, and this should be about 5. Yep, 4.95. So again, we're within tolerances there. So perfect. This looks like it is going to meet our needs as we get it installed. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen up our bracket here. So the one difference that you can see visually is the shape and size here. So this is an oval capacitor. This new one is a round one. Same specs, different shape. I'm hopeful that I can get this round one to fit inside the bracket here. The only reason I got this one is it had a much quicker lead time than getting an oval one. So Amazon had this overnight delivery. This would have been probably another week to get a capacitor, same spec. So now with our breaker off and our capacitor discharged here, we can start removing the leads from our old capacitor and start landing them onto our new capacitor. Big thing here is just make sure that you're lining the leads up from the old compressor onto the same terminals, whether it's common, fan, or compressor terminals here. So here's our old capacitor here. We've got the common in the middle, fan over here, and then the compressor over here. So we're just going to make sure that these leads make it onto the same ports onto our new capacitor. So before I move the wires over onto our new capacitor here, I'm just making sure that the bracket that we have here will accommodate our round capacitor. And it looks like it will. I'm probably just gonna have to drill a little hole in the sheet metal here just to accept the screw. Alright, so it looks like the round capacitor will fit fine here. So now we're gonna go ahead and transfer our wires over. So the first one I'm gonna do is our hermetic cable. Alright, so I've gone ahead and landed it right here onto our hermetic port. Now we're gonna take our two commons. Onto our common ports. And lastly, we've got our fan. Go ahead and plug that in. Just gonna snug this up a little. All right, we are all squared away out here. Got everything transferred over. We're gonna get ready to test this one. All right, turning the breaker back on. All right, we have got things running again out here. Our new capacitor in place. I can already feel the refrigerant line getting nice and cold here, so hopefully it won't be too long and we'll have the house cooled back down. Alright, so now that we're back in business, I do want to make note, if you're not comfortable working with electricity, major appliances, definitely call a licensed HVAC technician to take care of this. So for me, I've worked around electricity quite a bit. I'm not licensed, but I know when to shut off power and how to get things wired up. This is pretty simple, but again, if it's outside of your realm of comfort, definitely don't take any chances there. Alright, so here is our old capacitor that we removed. I probably should have done a test on it before even ordering a new one, but again, hearing the buzzing coming from the AC unit really led me to believe it's the capacitor. But what we're going to do is just go ahead and test to see how much capacitance it still has. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and put our leads onto the common and the fan. And we are getting 4.87, so really not too bad there. It's still within spec. Our spec is plus or minus 5%, so that'd give us down to 4.75 is our allowable tolerance there. So we're actually still within spec there. Now we're going to go ahead and check the compressor, see what sort of capacitance we've got. We're at 41.18. So really, we're allowed, again, up to 5% tolerance, which would give us up to 42 that we could be at. So technically, this capacitor is still within spec. And so even though our old capacitor was technically within tolerances for its capacitance, I know there's some other tests you can do as far as checking voltage and even resistance. I'm not really sure how to do that, and honestly, after getting the new capacitor in and the AC unit started up, I figure that's proof that this capacitor is bad. Not exactly sure why, but again, if you've got a humming, buzzing noise coming from your AC unit outside and it's not starting, this is now the second time in about 18 years where I've had a capacitor go bad on it, and replacing it got it fired right up. And really, changing out the capacitor takes only a few minutes. It's only about 20 bucks or so. Way cheaper than an HVAC service call, so I figured if I changed out the capacitor and it didn't work, well, I'm out 20 bucks and I'll call a service tech potentially. And I've heard stories about some of those HVAC service calls. Had a guy recently where a service tech came out, swapped out the capacitor, and it was about a $250 charge. So $20 versus $250. That's good in my book.